And welcome everybody to the 33rd episode of the Hashtag Invest This podcast. I am your host, Scott Bauer, and today we're joined by Mike Wagner. Mike, how you doing?
I'm very well, Scott. How are you?
I'm just doing fantastic. It's Friday, and I just got back from traveling. It sounds like you might have as well. So excited to be back in the office and getting some things done.
It always feels good to start getting stuff done again, doesn't it?
It really does. A little bit about Mike, and then I'll let him take over from there. He started investing in multifamily rentals back in 2007. But after 4 years of doing it, he was still stuck in his 9-to-5 job, and his projections had him going for another 10 years plus in that same career. He knew that he couldn't handle that and was sick of other people having more control over his time, so wanted to start looking at alternatives that might get him out of the rat race. That's when he stumbled on self-storage. He quit his job the day that he bought his first facility and has never looked back. So, with that being said, Mike, why don't you give the listeners a little bit more about your background, more on what you're focused on, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I went to school for way too long. I spent 6 years getting 3 degrees to become a physical therapist, and I really enjoyed being a therapist, but I always knew, even prior to graduating and entering the real world, that real estate was something that might enable me to one day get out of that rat race.
Right.
And had been practicing as a therapist for about 6 months, and I found myself in the fortunate situation of having a family member who wanted to liquidate a 2-family property in the city not far from where I grew up. Now, I lived 300 some odd miles from that at the time, but I knew the city, and I wasn't scared of the remote management because I was also moving back there.
Where was this?
This is Rochester, New York.
Okay.
And I was living out just north of New York City at the time.
Okay.
And so I drove home every weekend for 6 weekends in a row to rehab this place and get it rented. It was a 2-family, your typical buy with 0 money down, low payments, fix it up, tenant, refi, pull the cash to pay off the seller, and then rinse and repeat a whole bunch of times.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, I did that for several years, and my plan when I started was, if I can have 100 doors, each making $100 a month, that's 10 grand a month. There's no reason I would work for anybody if I had that kind of money coming in. And
Right.
So that's what I set out to do. And you mentioned it, 4 years later or so, I had 31 apartments. I redid the math, and you've probably experienced where things don't always work out exactly in the real world like you put them down on paper. So my 100 houses looked like it, or 100 apartments looked like it might need to be 150 apartments. And I projected my timeline, and that left me in a job that, again, I liked the job itself, but I was unfulfilled in the position. I was kind of stuck in middle management, feeling a little undervalued, not from a financial standpoint, but from I was just at other people's mercy as far as what I did and how I spent my time. And I hated that feeling, to be blunt about it. So I knew ultimately I had to pivot. And the moment that it came to kind of ahead was my wife and I were down in Costa Rica having a beautiful vacation. I mean, she was sunbathing on the beach. I can only stand doing that for like 6 or 8 minutes, and then I'm bored. So I had walked down. I was checking out some surfing lessons. I grabbed a beer from a cart, and I was just taking it all in. I mean, this sounds cheesy, but I was like walking with my ankles in the ocean. The breeze was blowing. The sun was shining. It was freaking perfect. And all of a sudden it dawned on me that in 48 hours I was going to be back at work. And I was like, oh, that sucks. Like, I went from extreme bliss to feeling trapped again instantly. And what dawned on me was I had set up my life, and I don't want to blame myself for this. I did what everybody said I should do. I went to school, got good grades, got a good job, climbed the corporate ladder, found a pretty girl, blah, blah, blah. I did all the things they said I should to be successful, and yet I felt unfulfilled. And I had set my life up where my happiest happened when I, quote unquote, vacated my life, right? I had to go on vacation to be my happiest. And then going home filled me with this sense of dread. And I was like, all right, this is it. Something's got to change. And that was the moment I look back on as probably the most important part of I'll say this, top 5 most important moments of my life. I've got a couple kids and a wife that are above on that list, but
probably trump that a little bit. Yeah.
From a business standpoint, that's where we were at. And so I went home and I just went nuts trying to find out what I could do to get out of my job a whole lot quicker than the decade I had been projecting.
And I think that's really, really common. I know that's very common for most people. I also have 3 degrees, went to school for 6 years and, 4.5 years, but I guess, got 3 degrees in that amount of time, not all for one. I wasn't a physical therapist, but that's what we were told to do. From leaving high school, it's okay, go to college, go get a job. That's the typical mindset, right? And that's the herd mentality. And sounds to me like, you're not a sheep, you're a wolf. And I think most listeners out on this podcast are the same way. So, interesting that you, I guess, took that path. And I think we all kind of have that time and place in time where that switch is switched, right? And you say, no more, I'm going to go do this on my own, right? Either you're going to figure it out or you're going to fail miserably doing it and try it again, right? I mean, that's what it is. That's what it is. So keep going. I mean, so then, you had got into some multifamily stuff and started with a duplex or a 2-family. And then where did it go from there?
Sure. So I had worked up by this point when I had my Costa Rican epiphany. I had worked up to 31 apartments and they were all making money. It's just they weren't getting me where I wanted to go fast enough. So I started looking at other options, and I was fortunate enough. My uncle, I was the recipient of a hand-me-down home study course about self-storage, home parks, and various things. And the storage really just struck me. And so that's what I decided to pursue. And it was, I want to say, I don't know exactly, maybe 14, 18 months after that trip to Costa Rica that I ended up closing on my first storage facility. And God bless her, my wife supported me. I don't know how. She's either crazy or she could see the future, but she let me quit that pretty good paying job as a physical therapist and buy the storage facility that was losing $2,000 a month when we bought it.
Those are the best.
Yeah. We were very confident that we knew what was wrong with it, and we were also pretty confident that we could fix it. I'm being honest, I had no idea how I was going to fix it. I just knew that I wasn't going to stop until I did fix it.
Right.
And so that's what we did. We bought that one in 2011 through a combination of some equity that I scraped together from my multifamilies. We still had all those houses. I've since liquidated all of them. The last one sold a couple months ago, and
it's exciting.
Yeah, it was a self-created milestone. I wanted to get rid of them just cause. Not that there's anything wrong with investing in multifamilies. It's just I had transitioned, and it was a way to close the loop, if you will.
Sure.
And that first storage facility we bought in 2011 is actually under contract to sell right now. I'm supposed to close on it later this month.
And so you're selling that self-storage?
Yeah, I never anticipated selling them. They were always a buy and hold to me. That's really been my MO, even with the houses. But I got a strong offer. I'm actually only selling 90% of it. And the property has potential to grow further, but I think I've taken advantage of a really good growth cycle for that particular market. I think we're probably at a stall for 12 to 18 months, and I've got 2 other projects, one current and one very imminent, where I can kind of move that equity and have an accelerated return. So it's just a matter of velocity of money. Move it from where it's going to sit and make me a good 10, 11% of my money for the next couple of years, or I can cash out, move it to something that will literally be 100+ return on investment over the course of the next 12, 24 months.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I can understand that. Now, are you in Rochester now?
I do. I live outside of Rochester,
okay,
which is Western New York.
Okay.
We've got the 2 properties here. The one I'm selling is about an hour from home. The second one is 20 minutes from home. And then most recently, back in April, I bought one down in Florida.
Okay. Okay.
I'm working on one in North Carolina as well. So the storage is keeping us busy, that's for sure. What I love about it is that it fits my personality well, in that I'm kind of a 100-mile-an-hour guy. When I dig into a project, my OCD and type A takes over, and I really want to get after it. But then I want to be able to hit the cruise control button. I want to be able to disappear for a month, 2, 3 months at a time, and not come back to a train wreck like I sometimes did with my rental portfolio. We've got the storage system set up where over the last 7 or 8 years, I've been able to create these remote management systems and put them in place where once a facility is up and running, well, I'll say this, the current 3 facilities that I own take me between 5 and 10 hours a week to manage. Now that doesn't count if I want to add a building or expand or, increase things. That's just the maintenance time. But that's a pretty good sized portfolio as far as income goes, for a not huge amount of time invested each week.
Oh man, that's huge. Anytime you're spending 5 to 10 hours, that's it. I mean, what doesn't take a whole lot of income to have great return on investment on your time there, right? I mean, that's phenomenal. Now, how big are these units? If let's say the person listening wants to get into self-storage, what are you looking at? Are you looking at, are they 10 bed or are they 10 stall or are they 100? How big are these?
Sure. I can, tell you what my experience has been and tell you kind of the strategy that I've created. And it's my model is my model for a reason. It's as perfect a model for me as it can be. It's not necessarily the perfect model for everybody.
Right.
But I think it is, generally speaking, a very good model. And that is what I look to do is find underperforming properties. And so the size of the property, generally speaking, I'm buying between $300,000 and $500,000 properties.
Okay.
And that's usually going to get you somewhere between 10 and 20 to 25,000 square feet of storage.
And now how many is that? So it goes on square footage then. It doesn't necessarily go on bed or stall or their garage or whatever.
I speak about it relative to square footage. We could also break it down by units is what we would call them.
Okay.
But the truth is, square footage is the more accurate way to go, and the more sophisticated folks become in this niche, you'll hear them transition away from units to that, because a unit might rent to you for $50 a month or $175 a month. And the units can change in size. If you buy a facility that's relatively modern, you can move the walls of these to change your unit mix and the sizes and that sort of thing. What never changes, unless you add buildings, is the square footage that you're purchasing and the rent per square foot. And so it's just an apples to apples better way to compare. Sure. And so again, my model is to buy underperforming. The facilities we've bought have been anywhere from 40 to 60% occupied. The idea being these properties are largely based on, their value is largely based on the income stream. Yep. So we want to implement an operational overhaul, get income up, expenses down to industry standards or below, and then have them reevaluated based on the income stream that's double. I look to double or triple the value of a property in a 2 to 4 year time period. That's kind of my rough starting criteria.
Okay. Let's see where to go with that. So I know that self-storage is based on, well, I guess I don't know, but let me bounce this off you. Is it based on how many people are in a geographic region? Is that how you base the need for self-storage?
Absolutely.
Amount? Okay.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. So what we're going to do is if we see a potential property somewhere, depending on the market, whether it's urban, suburban, rural, as an aside, I like to be on the outskirts of suburbia or into the rural areas, just a personal preference, and there's some investment rationale for that. But the more rural we are, the bigger radius circle we're going to draw around a property. In urban areas, it's going to be maybe a mile. As you get into suburbia, you're going to grow to 2, 3, 4 mile radius. And then rural areas, a 5 to 7 mile radius around the property. And you're going to look how many people are there. And Then there are demand projections for storage. Nationally, it's 7 to 8 square foot per person. So that means if you've got an area with 10,000 10,000 people in it, you would expect, using the national number, 70 to 80,000 square foot of storage could be supported in that market. Now there's overlap because every facility has its own radius, but so it's a little bit art, a little bit science. But the bottom line is, if you looked in that and saw there's 10,000 people and only 40,000 square foot of storage, you know there's an opportunity potentially to fill the demand that's existing unmet.
Can that be now going in to build something? Go and build yourself a self-storage, or take over an underperforming, or get into the nuts and bolts about how you find this stuff, because a couple of things I'm super interested in too. I mean, people always wonder that, right? Self-storage, it doesn't seem like that would be I don't understand a lot about it, so give us some more information about it.
So here's the deal, self-storage used to be the ugly stepchild of commercial real estate. It was like the dude with his feet up on a desk, a cigar in his mouth, being, what do you need? Like not a glamorous niche, if you will. It's become much more sophisticated now, but
right.
There's still opportunities to keep it really simple. And to touch on your point about moving into a market and filling the unmet demand, what I look to do is find existing properties.
Okay.
That's not to say that development or even conversion aren't great opportunities. Conversion being, you go into an area where Kmart just went out of business, buy the 80,000 square foot building, and then chop it up into storage units. That's a very lucrative model, and it can work really well. My preferred method is to buy an existing facility that's underperforming. And what I like about that, I also, of course, love if it's got additional land where I can expand and add buildings to further meet the demand. But the reason I choose that model over ground up development is, when you develop from the ground up, you're going to have, even on a 2-acre property, you're going to have $100,000+ into earthwork. You're going to have the cost of the land, and then you're looking at $30 to $35 a square foot to build. And all of that work that goes into the earth isn't going to generate you any revenue, right? So in order to make the project feasible, you've got to build out 20,000 square feet right off the bat, because if you only build 10,000 and fill it up, you're still going to be either on the wrong side of zero or not nearly profitable enough to make it time, right? So by buying, so you really have to swing for the fences is what development is. And there's nothing wrong with that if you've got strong market data to support yourself. If you can go 2 to 3 years without making money, it's really a deep pockets game in my eyes. And it's a good way to park money if you don't need an immediate return on your investment. I'm not quite that. I do is buy an existing facility,
right,
that allows me to just stabilize it. So take it from 40% occupancy to 85, 90% occupancy. We've already doubled it in value. Now the banks are clamoring over me to give me money to buy out my private investors. And I'll say, hey, banker, by the way, here's the demand projections for this area. Here's the current supply. I'd like to add 5,000 square feet. And they'll give me the money for that. And I can just do it. I can phase it very effectively. I can add 5,000 square feet. I don't have to add 20,000 at a time and hope that my numbers are right. I can really dip my toes deeper into the water as I look to fully meet the demand that's left in the market. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it definitely does. Yeah. So I'm trying to think of how hard is it to find these properties? I mean, so it's very similar to saying, okay, if you're talking about apartments, I don't want to go build A-class apartments. That's not my style. I'd rather buy a B or a C-class and renovate it and raise rents, and then I have a state, right? Or new builds versus taking an old one and renovating it, as far as single-family houses go. It's very similar, right? But how, where do you go to LoopNet to find underperforming assets? Do you go where do you go for that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and my answer is everywhere. But I can give you a little more detail. So I've got 4 facilities right now. The 3 of them that I currently own, and I have 1 with a letter of intent I'm hoping to have under contract tonight. But I found 1 on LoopNet. Is that right? I take that back. 2 of them were on LoopNet, listed properties. One of them was I had sent a whole bunch of direct mail, which is an awesome way to go about it if you identify the properties that meet your criteria. And you can start really small too. For somebody who's new, pick the 100 nearest facilities to you that aren't, the big extra space REITs, but the nearest 100 mom and pops, and you're sending out, it's $50 a month in marketing. Right. And maybe a cramp in your hand if you're writing the letters yourself,
Yeah.
I do it on a much bigger scale. Although, there's 55, 60,000 storage facilities in the country, my criteria whittles that down to 1,346 properties that I target. And
this is across the country?
That's across the country. Yep.
Okay.
And they get a letter every I divide my list into 3. So I'm only spending $300, $400 a month on marketing.
Nothing.
And you find one deal and, it pays for 10 years of marketing. But this one facility that I'm speaking about, I had sent direct mail to multiple times and it got kicked back to me. And like an idiot, I looked at it and go, wasted 50 cents. And I threw it in the pile to, scrub my list and eliminate it. And then I'd forget to do that and it'd get returned to me the next month. And one day I was out on a run and I lived within like 7 miles of this property at the time. And I was running past it. I was like, screw it, I'm just going in. And I literally like sweaty shirt, like gross, walk in the place and talk to the nice little old lady, see if she owns it. She says, no, but I can give you the information of the guy who does. So I called him and he said, well, she was kind of wrong. I don't own it yet. I'm in the process of buying it. And I was like, man, I'll be honest with you. I wanted to buy the place. I'm sorry you beat me to the punch. And we just kind of developed a rapport. And I just said, if I can ever be of value to you, have you ever done this storage thing? And, we got to know each other. I literally called him every month for 18 months while he was still closing on the property. And at one point I said, if you just want to flip this for quick cash and not learn this storage game, I don't know if I can offer you enough that it would be quick cash because I don't know what you're paying for it, but we should at least talk about it. And he ultimately called me the day after he bought it and said, hey, let's go have coffee. 3 hours later, pretty sure he made 50 to 70 grand off me overnight. But I bought that property for 365. I've put probably 200,000 into it. Maybe 300. I'm probably into it for 6 or 650 and it's worth 1.1. So he can have his 50 to 70 grand, right?
Right. And that doesn't always matter, right? But it doesn't matter how much people are making off of it. The people that are looking at that number, I mean, it drives me nuts when you're buying properties from people and they're like, well, what'd you pay for? It's like, that doesn't really matter at all, right? It's
how much meat's left.
Right. And well, do the numbers make sense? Period. Right. Whatever that means, right?
Yep.
So how do you value self-storage property? How, if I'm going to go and I find one and I, send out some direct mail, even in my local market here to see what type of, where do I find, let me break down the questions. Where do I find the list to mail to of self-storage?
Sure. That depends how big you're going. If you're, not scared of spending $500 or $1,000 to purchase a list, there's that. I started out by literally jumping on Google and doing it town by town because I live, in a rural area outside of a city, and I wasn't interested in the properties in the city. So I just picked Bloomfield, New York, self-storage. And then I'd write down the addresses and put them in an Excel sheet. And I basically built my own list of 4 or 5 county area.
Okay.
And so that's one way to go about it.
You've cut out a couple of times. I didn't hear. Did you say purchase the list from ListSource?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't specify ListSource, but that is one option. Info
Okay.
USA is another.
Info USA.
Any of the places where you're typically going to go to buy your leads or your list, right, they'll have a storage one as well.
Okay. And then, so, you're trying to figure out, you get in touch with one and they express an interest in possibly wanting to sell it. How do I value that thing? Is it an occupancy thing or?
Yeah, it's primarily an income-based valuation. Now I want to make a disclaimer that this is an overview and a generalization, and it's going to
Right.
vary widely. But generally speaking, what we look at is a multiple of the net operating income. So we're going to take our gross our collected income, we're going to subtract out the expenses, get our NOI, and then multiply it by a factor, and that's determined based on our desired cap rate. Generally speaking, I use a 10 as my back of the napkin number. So if I've got a facility bringing in 100 grand and let's say expenses are 40 grand, which is a little higher than it should be, that leaves an NOI of 60. Very generically ballpark, that's going to be worth $600,000. I'm not going to pay $600,000 for it.
Right.
Unless the gross potential revenue is 200 and they're sitting at 50% occupancy, I'll pay 600 all day long as long as I know that I can fix their vacancy problem.
Right.
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 Now, in some markets, these things trade at a 5 to 6 cap. And so that's going to be a 15 to 20 multiple of the NOI. Those aren't the markets I play in. That's downtown Chicago, Manhattan, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But generically speaking, that's how we do it. As you're looking at the income and expense numbers, you're wise to know that the industry standard for expenses is 30 to 35% of income.
Okay. And what does that make up? You're in self-storage. There's no tenants, right? So what makes up maintenance?
Sure. So those operating expenses are going to be property taxes and insurance. Those are going to be the big ones. Depending on the size of the facility and your management structure, it's going to be either third-party management or payroll, and then advertising. And those are the big ones. Of course, you're also going to have internet, telephone, office supplies, etc. But when you're doing the back of the napkin calculations, if you just divide the gross revenue by 33%, or multiply it by 33%, take a third of it, that's what you should expect expenses to be.
Okay. You should be safe, at least back of the napkin. Now, what does the operational management look like? If you have, let's go at the top end, if you got a 25,000 square foot property, how many managers do you need? Do they need to be on site? Do you have an office for them? What does that look like?
Now, at risk of getting hate mail from people who will disagree with me on this, I have one part-time employee total. She's at the one location that I'm selling. So once this property closes, I'll have 2 storage facilities, one in New York, one in Florida, a total of about 50,000 square feet, and I will have 0 employees. And I will spend 5 to 10 hours a week managing them. The way we do that is through a system that I've kind of created, which is just a piecemealing various vendors and strategies that I've come up with on my own, putting them together in a system that works. And it's made up of 3 parts. Online portal, if you will, for customers to rent, electronically sign, and pay for storage units. A call center that answers the calls 6 days a week, and then boots on the ground of some sort. You do need someone to deal with the emergencies, to show a unit for the folks that might not be entirely comfortable renting one without looking at it, and those are becoming less and less. But to cut a lock if someone loses their key, those types of things. So for my Florida location, it's 1,100 miles away. There's a mobile home on the property. Very nice, double-wide, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It would rent for $850 a month. I have an awesome gentleman who lives in it for $250 a month.
And manages your self-storage when you need it.
Exactly. He's just available to handle the things when they come up. He's 24/7 surveillance.
Yep.
Really well.
Yeah, that's really smart. That's very smart.
Now, there are markets, again, that's one of the reasons I like these secondary and even tertiary markets, rural areas. this setup might not work if I put it in an area where there was somebody who was staffed 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, skilled at selling. I might be out of my league from a competitive standpoint. And that's why I'm selecting my markets based on how well they fit this model, this remote management structure.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, in today's world, you don't have to have a lot of employees. You can do so much online, especially in the space. So good to hear that that's what you're doing. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Or what type of income does your two properties give you? I mean, is it comfortable? Are you comfortable on two properties?
Yes, we are. Our bills are paid. We live pretty darn modestly. We vacation like crazy, but our house is paid for. Our cars are paid for. We don't have bills, and we don't pay interest to other people. And so it only takes 50, 60 grand to keep our bills paid, and 20,000 of that spent on vacationing 3 months a year. So
right.
We're comfortable, but pretty basic. Our storage facilities generate, the three that I currently own prior to the sale generate about $500,000 in revenue a year. I would say very back of the napkin, a third of that goes to debt service, a third of it goes to expenses, and you can guess where the other third ends up.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that standpoint, we don't need to own more storage facilities. I enjoy the before and after of buying a place that's struggling and getting it turned around. There's a challenge to that I enjoy. I'm also have started helping other folks implement the systems that I've learned over the last 7 years. And there's a lot of reward that I experience in seeing other people implement the same things. And I'm not all that interested in getting rich. I love money and I love what it can do for my life, but I love what it can do for my life way more than I love it.
Right. So yeah, that's it, man. That's absolutely it.
I think too often, I'm sorry, I was going to just say, I think too often we get stuck where we're using a financial thermometer as our only gauge for success. And I make sure that I've got 10 different thermometers that I'm checking on to gauge how successful I am at any given time in life. And so that's a little bit of a tangent, but it goes to answer your question about 5 to 10 years from now. I want to have several storage facilities that I'm a minority partner in, because I've helped 5 or 10 or 15 other people become majority owners and learn what I've learned and help them use storage to change their lives and thereby adding to mine.
That's huge. And I'm just taking an assumption here. Is that what's happening with this? You're still going to have 10% ownership in the one that you're selling. Did you help them get to that point of owning?
Yes and no. This one is more of just they're gentlemen. It's 2 gentlemen that I know and I have done some consulting for in the past. They're pretty sophisticated. They own more real estate than I do, but they've moved into the storage sector more recently. And the 10% is how they convinced me to sell. I wasn't willing to sell 100 of it. And that's, so to answer your question, yes, that's definitely part of it.
Awesome. Well, just for sake of time, and we're coming up on time, we're going to move into a lightning round. Are you ready for a lightning round?
I am indeed.
All right. What is your hashtag invest this tip that you can give our listeners to keep them moving forward, if you were to say one?
Yeah, it's hard to pick one, but if I had to, I would say that you need to make sure you're chasing your own definition of success rather than somebody else's.
That's huge. Thank you for that. Do you have a favorite book that you've read and had a massive impact on your life?
I do, and I've got a bunch of them, but if I picked one, it would be a book called Life in Air, which
yeah.
You know it. Awesome.
I do.
Essentially, I won't go too deep into it other than to say it gave me the idea that it's okay to design your life first and then create a business that fits into the time that's left over rather than the way the rest of us do it, which is to design a business or a job first and then try to squeeze life in to what's left over.
Dude, I'm into that, man. Yeah, I actually just had a conversation this last week with a guy about that book. I haven't read it yet, but I just ordered it, so it'll be here today, actually. So excited
Oh,
too.
nice.
That's just ironic,
Very nice.
very ironic. Who's giving you the best advice? And, I'm sure you've had coaches and mentors. So who's given that to you?
Yeah, probably the single biggest piece of advice or best piece of advice that I've ever gotten. Oh, it's so hard to pick one. But and I can't feed it to you verbatim, but it's based on the idea that you can't outgive the system, right? And that is, without giving you too much about me, I come from a past of being relatively financially, I would say I had financial integrity. The truth is I was cheap, right? Because I had a wrong relationship with money. I've since kind of, I hope, converted a little bit to where that relationship is a lot healthier. And rather than being cheap, I truly have financial integrity where I spend money on the things that really represent my values, and learning that squeezing a dollar is not the best way to make it grow. And that doesn't mean, hey, just invest it somewhere. Sometimes it means just freaking give it away with no expectation of return, and watch what either God or the universe or karma or whatever it is you believe in, watch what happens. Because again, as my mentor told me, no matter how hard you try, you can't outgive the system. It'll always be brought back to you in some form or another. The key is you have to give without the expectation of return.
You're on point, man. 100%. I can't agree more. Giving is the secret to living, right? And Tony Robbins talks a lot about that. I'm a firm believer in that. So thank you for sharing that piece of information. How do you like to give back? You mentioned that you coach, mentor, but how do you like to give back?
Yeah, I try to give in all areas. I don't believe in just cutting checks. I do believe in that, but I also believe in giving time, money, expertise, basically sharing everything that I'm fortunate enough to experience. I want to help spread around. I also, take on specific projects right now. In particular, I've started to raise some money and funds for organization that raises money for research into treatment and cure for cerebral palsy, which is a condition that 1 in 323 kids are born with, and it affects their development in any number of various ways. So what I'm doing right now, it sounds a little crazy, but I'm trying to raise money and awareness for that throughout the month of August. On September 4th, for every $100 that I'm able to raise, I'm going to add an hour to an extended fast. So if I raise 10 grand, I'll go 100 hours without eating. And my hope is that over the course of August, I can raise a bunch of money and awareness for this organization, and as a means to convince people to donate if they don't have if they don't have the same passion I do for this particular cause, is that I've offered up to the world a free storage consultation, training, whatever you want to call it, phone call in exchange for a donation of any amount. So that's kind of what I'm putting out to the world. It'll be announced on my Facebook page in the next week or so, and we'll see where it goes.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, you're giving something up for something much greater than yourself. I can tell you 100 hours of fasting is very, very, very difficult. I intermittent fast every day, which is basically I only eat between the hours of 12 and 8 p.m. And fast for the other 16 hours. And although that is not challenging, I do go every other week, every month maybe for 24 hours straight. And that's even tough. So
it's hilarious. I do the exact same thing, 16 hours a day, 24 hours once a week, 36 once a month. I've done 72 hours before, so my real goal is to at least get to the $7,300 donation amount so I can set a record.
Yeah.
But this represents vision stacking. So I've got all of these elements, all those 10 thermometers. One of them's health, one of them's giving, right? So now instead of just raising money or just starving myself, I'm putting them both into a sandwich. And I get to accomplish, it's two birds with one stone.
Right.
And I try to do
Right.
that with everything in my life.
Right. Awesome. Well, where can the listeners find you if they want to learn more about either their self-storage or how they can give back or how they can join you in your extended fast? Where can they find you?
Yeah, the best place is probably on Facebook at Storage Rebellion.
Okay.
And like I said, in the next week or so, there'll be some videos up there with an opportunity for people to give to this cause if they're compelled to. There's also my website is thestoragerebellion.com. There's a couple case studies and a webinar if people want to check those out.
Okay. We'll make sure to put that into the show notes. And hey, man, I really appreciate you being here today. I know I've learned a lot so far, just kind of on your journey, the steps you've taken to get to self-storage and what self-storage has allowed you to do with your life and kind of take control of your life. You said some very important points throughout the interview here. One that really stuck out to me was just that, designing your life first. It's okay to do that, and then finding the money to support that later, or designing your business around that. And I think, especially in the Western world that we live in, that's hard to come by, right? Just like you had mentioned, most people do it the other way around. And I think it's really important that people think about that. So, with that being said, Mike, thanks for being here, man. I look forward to staying in touch with you, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Sounds good, man. Thank you.
Okay. Talk to you. See you.